Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Play Expo Manchester 2017. My name's Dan Wood.
I'm Ravi Abbott.
Now, we host a podcast called the Retro Hour Podcast. If you're not familiar with it, I think we are the UK's only weekly retro gaming podcast. We come out every Friday, we go through the headlines in the world of retro, and also we welcome on a veteran of the video games industry. Now, this is someone who probably shaped our childhoods, people who are behind those influential games that defined a generation. And this weekend on the Retro Hour stage here at Play, we're bringing some of our favourite guests live to you guys. Now, let's see who we've got in the crowd today. Let's see the real hardcore fans. Anyone remember Bill's Tomato game? Oh, there's a few. What about Wipeout? Lemmings? I think people played Lemmings. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm play welcome to the boys from Psygnosis. Now, first of all, guys, it'd be nice if you could, let's go left to right, if you could introduce yourselves and say what your job role was at Psygnosis.
Hello, technology. There we go. I started Psygnosis in '92. First started as a tester, games tester.
And before that, you were doing?
And before then, I did a bit of work for Codemasters and drew some graphics for some games. Started at Psygnosis, games tester, games evaluation, moved on to design and level building.
Hi, I'm Mike Kaiser. Started off as Salim Siwani before marriage. I graduated in 1993 doing computer science and artificial intelligence, and then I started in 1993 at Psygnosis as a computer programmer. I've worked on Crazy Ivan, a few back-end bits for things like Wipeout, worked predominantly on Wipeout Fusion for PlayStation 2, Motorstorm on PlayStation 3, and Drive Club for PlayStation 4.
Yes. Hello. I'm Mike Clarke. I was the musician, sound person from 1992 until 99. I started the same day as Chris during, obviously, hello. I was there, from 92 to 99 from the Amiga through to, I'm not sure what the last thing I worked on was. Basically a bit of everything, did a bunch of PlayStation stuff, Amiga stuff, Mega CD, a lot of that. That's it.
Well, behind you, that's the Psygnosis offices.
Oh yes, South Harrington building.
So when we were kids, playing these games, I always imagined that the Psygnosis Liverpool studios would be the most glamorous buildings and places of work in the world. Was it like that?
Yes. No. So let's see. Chris would have been up here. Well, you were in there, weren't you?
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah, this was the test room. This was programming art, wasn't it? In there? And down here as well.
That was programming art. That one there.
This one.
That one there, yeah.
And then, don't know.
As some sort of admin.
Video
admin.
production down there, wasn't it?
Yes.
We also had round the back as well, where we had the producers and marketing and stuff like that. And that was it really. For when we first joined, that was all that we had. It did grow quite a bit, but that was it. It was all right in there actually. That was all right. Yeah, I had a good time there.
What was the kind of quality of the place like? Was it as nice and high quality as the Psygnosis releases?
Well, as I say, that place wasn't bad.
Okay.
The next one, however,
Century buildings.
yeah, it wasn't so great. So, yeah, it was quite a sort of nice warehousey feel in there. But we outgrew it, and then we had to get another office building where we all got shoved off in a corner and almost forgotten about. If you could move a couple of slides up onto the other building, there we are again. That's where we were. Top floor. It's now a Royal Mail place. Yeah, next one. And again. Next one. That's the same again. Stolen off Google Maps, you can see there.
So where the magic happened?
And one more. Oh, that was the first game that I worked on, Bill's Tomato game.
Well, we'll get to that, Mike, 'cause it's interesting. You were like a real Amiga head, weren't you? When you discovered the Amiga. I know you did the C64 before that, but was the Amiga really where you found your feet in terms of making music?
It was. Yeah, without the Amiga, I wouldn't be a musician because that was my outlet, really. When I first got Pro Tracker on the Amiga, I didn't know what it was, but I realized it could do music, and then that's all I did. And I used to go to a computer club, and because of stuff on Rob Hubbard and Commodore 64 music and all of that, I wanted to do music for games, so I did. But it was only through a friend that I managed to get a job at Psygnosis, and he got me to build some art game while I was still at college. And then once I'd finished college, I applied for a job and got a job as an evaluator, same as Chris. The intention was always to do audio, was to be around and available whenever new games come in so I can do the music on them. And that worked out all right.
Obviously, around the time you guys joined, I mean, Lemmings hadn't come out long before then. I mean, when you got there must have still been a massive buzz about Lemmings, because that was such a big title, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think Lemmings was sort of the main type of game that sort of encapsulated the place. Everything surrounded Lemmings. It was all about Lemmings. Even the testing carried on for Lemmings for different versions. It was just it was a great game, but slowly and surely other games came out, took over.
And when you played the 40th platform when you were a tester.
Yeah, I was just saying before, there was some retro event in the Manchester Science Museum a couple of months ago, and I went just to have a look around, see what it was like, and there was a woman playing Lemmings on a computer, and I sat beside her and watched it. And she was enthralled, just looking at the screen, going, "Oh, I must complete it, I must complete it." Then she turned around, looked at me, and said, "Oh, do you want to go?" Sorry, I went, "No, no," and I got up and walked away. I've had enough Lemmings.
We once had a letter from a woman in South Carolina complaining that we were all devil worshippers because we had hell levels in Lemmings, and they had 666s drawn into the background. That's a sort of weird. We'd get some weird letters sometimes.
Well, that game as well, it was ported to so many different systems. It wasn't just an Amiga game, it was all over the place. Probably as much as Worms was, or another game like that, probably more.
I think at its peak, I think it was 28 different platforms it got ported onto. I don't know why I've got that number in my mind, but I remember it being somewhere around that. It was pretty much everything that was available. It was
even the Commodore 64. We were talking about this before, that had quite a random story behind it, especially the music, didn't it?
Yeah. Okay, so right, so Jerome Tell did the music on the Commodore 64 Lemmings, and I clearly remember that during the end of the development, he came to the Psygnosis offices to finish the music with the programmers, and he swears that he didn't. He simply cannot remember it, and it's a little bit of a point of contention between the two of us. Every time I bring it up, he absolutely swears he was never. He was there. He came to the previous building, and he was there for 3 or 4 days. Why would you not remember? I don't know.
Well, Lemmings 2 was a fantastic title, and it was such an improvement because they had all the different tribes and the kind of whole book with it and the complete Psygnosis package. What was it like working with those?
Not a lot, really, because that was done up north at DMA in don't know where they were, Dundee, weren't they? It was always very impressive. We had the level editor, and we got offered to do some levels for it, but they never ended up getting used, because we did that, didn't we?
We did, yeah, we had some input in that. That's sort of a vague memory now, but yeah, we did do some levels on for that. But just going back to the original Lemmings, one of the things that always sticks in my mind is testing Lemmings on a Game Boy, because each Lemming is like 2 pixels high, and so we'd spend hours just looking at this thing with a magnifying glass in front of it, completing these levels, but playing them over and over again. And we go on with tunnel vision. It was crazy, but yeah, great game, so many different formats.
Well, the original Lemmings concept, it just came out of some animation, didn't it? It was like a little 5-second looped animation that, I don't know if you guys have ever seen it. It did come out in a couple of cover discs and everything, but it blew my mind the amount of personality they could get into those tiny little pixels.
That's how a lot of games start, just with some stupid idea from someone. And animation's a good enough way. But there was loads of concept stuff done at Psygnosis for lots of games, especially later on, that would eventually turn into full games. That's how development works.
Well, how did Bill's Tomato game come around then?
Bill turned up with his disc. One of the things about Psygnosis was that it was a publishing resource, so it wasn't just a development house. Initially, it wasn't really even a development house because we didn't really have programmers making games. It would be independents that would come to Psygnosis to publish their game, and we'd have a load of artists and support for them. So Bill was another of the independent programmers who'd come with his game. It was just called Tomato Game, and the marketing department couldn't think of a better name because it just got stuck over the 6 months that it went through signing. And it was written by Bill, so it was Bill's Tomato Game. That's what it was.
And I noticed in the corner there, it said, if you go back just one slide, in the corner it said, includes a surprise gift from Heinz. Yeah. What was that then?
It was a sachet of tomato sauce. What a bargain. What a bargain. Yeah.
Who came up with that marketing idea?
One of the things about the marketing department is they were very innovative in what they did, and it was always trying stuff out like that. It seemed so ridiculous, but it was a bit of extra publicity, so why not?
And was it based on anything, or where did the idea come from? Because it was quite a different concept, that game, when you played it.
I don't know, really. Especially because Bill had been doing 3D stuff before that. He worked at DID doing, I can't remember, the simulation games, and then he turned up with a 2D platform puzzle game. So, yeah, it's good.
Yeah, it perfectly fit into that kind of puzzly, tricky kind of style Psygnosis had going at the time.
So this is all when we were still in that one building. Psygnosis was very good at nurturing developers. So if somebody had a good idea, they'd get flown over to come and pitch to Psygnosis for hiring. And me and Chris would do evaluations on games that people had sent in, which basically meant that we had a better job than the testers, because if we got bored, we'd just go and say, can I have something else?
Or go and hide in the storeroom.
Or go and hide in the storeroom, yeah. Yes.
The thing about your games, I mean, a lot of people remember Lemmings as being, despite the fact it was on so many different platforms, I think the Amiga was really its home. I mean, obviously, we kind of had a bit of a transition when we got to the kind of mid-90s. Did the Amiga kind of going away and the rise of the consoles affect you guys much then? Was that a big transitional period for you?
Well, that was where you entered.
Well, so I'd grown up mucking around on the Amiga and the Commodore 64, and so when the PlayStation prototypes came about and we started working on them, it was radically different. It was a very, very different machine. So yeah, it was a big learning curve. Certainly with Wipeout 1 and Crazy Ivan, which is the project that I actually worked on, but I worked on a project with two of the other Wipeout guys previously, and so we always had a good dialogue going on. So Wipeout and Crazy Ivan share an awful lot of the underlying tech. And while we were thrashing that out, it was, yeah, there were moments where, the boss was kind of saying, I want this game out, I don't know what the hell you're playing at, why has it been 2 years, blah, blah, blah. It was difficult, but we got there.
It was a nightmare, it really was. Can we have the next slide? Oh, there's some development discs. There you go, Tomato Game. That's basically what it came in with. Blood Money up there. That next one. Oh, that's the ATG group from about 1992. This was one of the reasons the Psygnosis was different, because these were programmers and a couple of artists, and they didn't make games, they just made stuff. And this is one of the main reasons we were bought by Sony, because there was investment in just trying out new things to see what it was like. Kenny over there used to be at Denton Designs, and John Gibson at the back used to do Spectrum Games, Stonkers and Zoom. So they had good programming heritage, and we had some borderline geniuses at the company at certain points.
So Paul Fruin especially.
Paul Fruin, yeah, very good. He wrote Amnios. Next one, please. So this was the building that we moved into, and what happened was, as we got bigger, we needed another office, so we moved down the road to that cesspit.
Yeah.
And one of the main problems was not really about, there were two sides to it. One was the technology, is that it was new technology, new stuff, totally new. It wasn't just like a different graphics format. When CDs come in, it was a whole change in mentality. But it was also a management problem, because nobody had made big games before, and we went from having 3 people to needing 20 on a team, and nobody had a clue what they were doing. Nobody.
Yeah.
So everybody, the whole company was just scrabbling around in the dark, really.
And we certainly didn't have any management software, none of the repository software that we have now, none of the collaboration software that you'll see in the industry everywhere.
And the early managers were all programmers.
Yeah.
And programmers do not make very good managers.
And you just got CD-ROM as well, which was a new thing to explore.
Yeah, so CD-ROM came in, we got palmed off to this building. We started on Microcosm here. On the FM towns. So because of the work that the ATG group had been doing, Psygnosis had been getting noticed, and so we got paid money from Fujitsu to make a new CD game, which was Microcosm. Now this is about a year before the Amiga one came out. And it was completely from scratch. Everything had to be written. We had to invent video compression. We had to invent all sorts of things. There was no libraries, no frameworks, no help whatsoever. And that was all done in here. Can we play the Microcosm intro?
Yeah, because no video compression existed before that with CDs. So
No, it was a big
you
deal.
had to build it from scratch pretty much.
So it was a long development time because there was no support provider whatsoever on a new piece of hardware that nobody had seen before. But the Microcosm intro is a good example of how the whole company was held together with pieces of string and tape. This is a pretty major production. Also, it really shows how advanced Psygnosis was compared to other companies. Because we had so many artists and silicon graphics machines, and it was all expensive stuff, and it was very art heavy. But this was not really like anything anyone had done before in 92, early 93. So originally the artists used Sculpt 4D and then moved on to the silicon graphics machines, and they were like £20,000 each. It was ridiculous.
I remember seeing this in a shop. I think, didn't this exist as a concept for the CD-TV originally?
No, not this one.
Okay.
It would look similar. It's the same set of artists.
Okay.
Same set of tools. So all of this is all done by the artists, obviously. It looks pretty rudimentary these days, but at the time it was pretty amazing because we've got chroma key in there and stuff like that. But all of the people you'll see are all the artists. It's all the Psygnosis team.
See, this is actually where my first day starts, because when I started and I joined the Advanced Technology group, some of these things were playing on the screens as I walked into my machine the very first day that I started. So
now we remember this was running on a CD32 with 2 megabytes of memory.
No, this was on an FM Town.
Okay, but you got it on the CD32 afterwards though as well.
It did, but
yeah.
the CD32 had a double-speed CD drive, whereas the FM Towns had single-speed, 150k a second. So it was pretty challenging. So here, I don't know who that is actually.
Yeah, because this was a unique thing, which was a kind of FMV cut in with the rendered scenes.
That's right.
And
it was a pretty big deal at the time.
Was a lot of it professional actors, or was it kind of staff from the...
Obviously, it's staff.
Because I remember these intros, and they were on the CDI as well.
Well, this was basically all done in that building, in the cesspit of a building that you just saw.
I'm sure that's Kirsty from marketing.
I think it's Nikki Westcott.
No, it's Kirsty Beamish.
Is it?
Yeah.
You know, if we're talking about impressive things that I remember from Psygnosis in this era, there was a demo that I think I watched it in Tandy with my jaw dropped watching it on the screen, and it was the PlanetSide demo. What was the story behind that, and was it ever a full game, or?
Well, you could say that the PlanetSide really led on to this sort of stuff because of the nature of the fact that it was just a research project, really. It wasn't ever really going to be a game. It was more of just a bunch of tools that the programmers had written as an example of what could be to come. I mean, there was always the hope that it would turn into a game, but at the time it wasn't really feasible with the technology. But again, it was something that showed that Psygnosis are trying to push the boat out, really, and got us noticed by Sony.
Well, when you were noticed by Sony, you got some PlayStation development kits, and I hear they were absolutely gigantic.
They were huge. Size of a photocopier.
Photocopier?
Big photocopier.
5.5-inch fans blowing air into lots and lots of discrete logic, 3 layers of discrete logic. It was, they were big, they were hot. And then, slowly as they got new versions, they rolled out these ISA cards, like dual ISA cards that you put into your PC, SCSI boards that you could talk to the things through.
Just to point out, that's Paul Franklin, 2-time Oscar winner for visual effects for Inception and Interstellar. He was one of our artists. Sorry, carry on.
I was going to say that PlayStation prototype then, was that heavily guarded? How did you get access to it?
So we often had rooms. We often had rooms with little keypads on them, so you could type in your number, go in, do the work that you needed to, and that followed through even on PS2 and PS3. Whenever you got a dev kit, there was usually a room that was devoted to it with a keypad, which ironically the cleaner could access at all times.
It's the reason why we don't have many photos of inside the building. It was always seen as being, don't take photos. That's bad.
And this was in the same building as you had before, the cesspit?
The original dev kit was in South Harrington, it was in the first building.
Yeah.
And then eventually, when it got smaller and more usable, we had them in Century Building as well. But it was about, probably from the light there, it was about this big. The first one, it was flipping massive, it was.
Yeah.
Huge.
They were very, very large machines.
Whenever I talk to people about kind of, systems that really influence them, obviously the Amiga's one they mention, but the PS1's always the second one. Everyone talks about that dinosaur demo that everyone remembers. What did you think when you first saw that technology?
Oh, I was slayed. I was absolutely amazed because I'd never seen anything draw that many triangles before. Every time I'd written a software renderer, you can render a couple of hundred, and then there's this object that's fully skinned, fully animated, and 2,000 triangles, and you're like, holy moly. Yeah.
2,000? God. When we got the first one, it was just the head, and that was impressive enough.
Yeah.
So we got I think it was the second revision, we had the dinosaur demo, and it can open its mouth, oh my God.
They can move its head from left to right, and it was walking, and oh my God.
Wow.
Well, people kind of forget that some of the games that came out early on in the PlayStation were actually ports from a lot of the 16-bit stuff. And Wipeout was started to be developed by you guys, and that was a complete brand new game, new soundtrack. How did that kind of start, and what was the process?
You might know more about the design and the Nick Burkham side of things than I do.
Well, Nick Burkham and Jim Bowers, the designer and the artist, were in the pub and had this idea to do a game that was a mixture of F-Zero on the SNES and
Mario Kart.
Mario Kart and Power Drome on the Amiga.
Oh yeah.
So Jim did a bunch of test renders, and it really just went from there.
Yeah.
The renders just looked really good. They were really, in fact, that's why we played the Hackers thing. Could we play the Hackers?
I was going to say, a lot of us first saw that game in the movie Hackers.
Yeah.
Not many people can say that Angelina Jolie played that game.
I do remember actually helping Jim Bowers with, so while I didn't do any of the rendering or any programming for that particular project, I do remember the banks and banks of SGI machines that he was doing his renders on, and they needed constant tending. So the number of late nights that I spent with him just making sure the machines stayed up.
So the concept videos were obviously shopped out for various reasons, and somehow a film company got hold of one of them and asked us to do a version of it for Hackers. So this was done at a very great haste, I seem to remember. Everybody panicking to get it delivered. Especially the audio.
Jim Bowers went and took the final footage on DAT tapes and hard drives in a taxi all the way to London.
Wow.
Mad, personally, in his lap.
And it got put on there.
I always wanted the two joysticks to play with, though. That looked like it could have been a good control mechanism.
If you actually look at the design of the game in that video, it would be rubbish to play.
I was going to say it changed quite a lot, didn't it, after this?
Yeah. Sony ImageSoft, there we are. So just after it got bought by Sony then.
Talking of the design, it had a fantastic kind of Japanese look with, all the cyberpunky and the kind of metal steely stuff going on. Who designed that, and kind of did that come from in-house Psygnosis stuff?
One of the things at Wipeout is it was very, very artist heavy. So the artists were all into clubbing and dance music at the time, so they were we have to have clubbing and dance music. We need it. so it really got pushed forward because of that. And the Designers Republic were doing lots of dance covers for CDs at the time, and artists like the style, so they got roped in to do some of the design work on it.
If you want to try.
I was going to say that soundtrack was pretty groundbreaking. Like the Prodigy was on it, and you'd never heard that in a video game before. Suddenly, it kind of felt like video games had become cool all of a sudden.
Well, they hadn't, but Wipeout has got a lot to do with that. There's no doubt about it. We had club nights where we'd take it round with a bunch of PlayStation machines for clubbers to play, and that was unheard of. It really was, and it did make a big difference to having mainstream acceptance for the PlayStation there.
Yeah, certainly when I first started going clubbing, whenever you told someone, I work as a video games programmer, they'd be like, whatever. And then slowly as the PlayStation caught on, it was like, oh really, you're a games programmer? So you had the full gamut of rejection.
Yeah, I certainly remember going into a nightclub and seeing all these PlayStations and then going, oh, they're all free to play as well. That was fantastic.
What does Chris remember of Wipeout?
Oh, Wipeout. Yeah, I totally agree with it being seen as cool. It felt in
in Psygnosis it felt that way as well. You know, you get games where, you know, it does, the game itself appears really great, but the company itself will sort of say, yeah, great, let's go on to the next thing. Yeah. But within Psygnosis, that stayed cool. Even the design of that, the feel, it just being involved in testing is like an honour. I think that's a bit too much, but a privilege to, you know, sit there and play it over and over.
There was a point where there was a little queue at lunchtime to have a go on the dev version. I know that one of the programmers was nigh on obsessed. He wasn't working on it as a programmer, but every single lunchtime he was there straight away on one of the dev machines, having a go wipe. And then when you see that happening, you sort of know this is going to do quite well. Because it was really good. It wasn't at the beginning. It was awful at the beginning. It was awful. It took a while to get to that point. We had to have a talk by the managing director to ask us what the hell we were doing, and it was terrible. There was about 20 of us in the room, and he basically said, "You've got to sort these games out, or you're all fired." And after that happened, it made a massive difference. The whole ethos changed, and everyone really got down to it, and it came out well, the way it did.
You know, kind of speaking of how hard you guys worked on that, I mean, didn't like Tim White do the music in like a month or something?
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
It took him 2 weeks. It was supposed to have all licensed music, and the deals fell through at the last minute, and there was 2 weeks. So Tim basically killed himself by spending 2 weeks doing 10 tracks, late into the night with very little sleep. So all done under a panic.
But the licensed music thing, that kind of harks back to Lemmings, you know, and the kind of use of licensed music then.
Or unlicensed music. Yeah. There was actually, we did get sued for using O Little Town of Bethlehem on Lemmings, which was actually still under copyright. Of course, he'd waited for 3 or 4 years until it had been on 28 formats and sold millions before coming out of the woodwork. But that was all sorted and resolved. But that was a bit of a shocker.
What about the single? Do you remember anything about the single, the Lemmings single?
Oh, there's always a flashback on that, yes.
Yeah? And there was a rumour it was KLF that produced it.
I don't remember that, but
yeah,
I'll have to find out about that.
Oh yeah, I may have something stored away in the loft upstairs, which...
God, I forgot about that, because we had these Lemming suits that were made for the shows, and I remember the video was,
it was
awful. It was awful.
It was, yeah, it was completely rubbish. Yeah, but there was a rumour it was KLF.
I'll try and find out about that. That's quite interesting.
We'll check an eBay later. Well, obviously, when we got to kind of that era when, you know, Wipeout came out, I mean, what was it like when Sony took over Psygnosis? How did it change?
Well, the money came in. We had a nice building. All of that got binned, thankfully. Well, we can show the next one. This is where we moved to. Not that one. There's my Psygnosis badge. Next one. Until we get. There's me in Theatre of Death, age 19. That's how duct tape it was. That's the sort of thing we do. Yeah. Next one, please. That was who we got bought by. When we got bought, it felt like Sony didn't really know what to do with us. There was also a sense that I felt that when we got bought, everybody else in the game industry went, what? Because we were basically doing rubbish games, and I don't think anyone really gave us much respect at that point. We were doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes and doing stuff like for the FM Towns and doing stuff that generally the UK gamers wouldn't see, that was giving us a good name in other sources, but in general for games we didn't really have a good reputation then. So we got bought and it was a big shocker, but it was because of all the things I've said, all the development work and the test stuff. And
well, that was a kind of unique thing, because a lot of groups like Sensible Software kind of couldn't cope with the change to 3D and were kind of left behind, and these were massive companies, you know,
well,
great reputation.
Nobody knew what they were doing. It was very hard to get over that period. So I described it before as like, if you've grown your hair long, you get to that awkward period where it's about this length and you can't do anything with it, and you can't tie it back and it looks ridiculous. That's what this transition period was like. It was just really awful. It was so hard. The development times are so short, so we got lumped in with Sony ImageSoft and just got all these film tie-ins just thrown at us. Do that, you got 3 months. And it was literally 3 months to do a whole game from scratch on CD. It was...
Maybe awesome. Some companies were kind of not willing to work with Sony because it was seen as a hi-fi company or Sony Interactive. You know, it wasn't seen as a traditional gaming kind of.
Well, no, I don't know when people knew about the PlayStation. It was surprising. Yeah. Do you remember anything about that?
to be honest with you, I don't remember much about the sort of politics around Sony. You know, I've always been a tech person, but I do always remember kind of thinking, wow, Sony going into games. They bought Psygnosis, Shadow of the Beast. They what? And it didn't compute for me. All I knew is that they needed people, and I got a job doing cool stuff. So yeah, if my own impression is anything to go by, I'd imagine lots and lots of people were like, Sony games, WTF? Yeah, Psygnosis.
Well, I was reading some articles, like just kind of looking at like that era. You can read all the magazines online now, and there are some articles talking about like the 3DO and the Atari Jaguar, kind of laughing at Sony entering the market, like as if a hi-fi company is going to be able to compete with like 3DO.
That's right.
In hindsight, they were a bit wrong.
Well, I'd like to think it's because of what we did. You know, it would have been very easy to kind of fail as the projects were, to be honest with you. Before Ian Hetherington took us into that big room and basically said, you need to sort this out, you're fired. We were screwing it up. And yeah, the fact is that we managed to pull it out of the bag, and we did manage to get some of these games to be incredibly popular and launch the PlayStation format.
Can we just have a next slide? Oh, there's me. When that was the new building we moved into, and we got the owl put on the top, which is quite cool. The next one, please. That's my room. That was my studio. Next one, and again.
You spend hours going
There's a business card.
to just chat.
Next one. Oh, that's the tanker party. Next one, and again. Skip there. That's the inside. But one more.
That is Jason Denton, who was my partner in crime in ATG, who moved on to the Wipeout team.
One more, please. There we go. So that's where we moved into. So it was a bit of a step up. The whole thing was our building. We generally had development down that side, and marketing and legal and testers down this side. And it was a nice big change that was. It was a real relief when we got out of there.
The teams must have grown in size massively, and you must have been working with, 4 or 5 people before, and then you'd be working with 20 or 30 later.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, basically, if you look, I mean, it's a pretty big place. You would have a development team on the entire floor for a project there in one of those sections. Although it's split between the back and forward of the building. Where were you, Chris? You were at the back there on Colony Wars?
Yeah, Colony Wars was just sort of behind, up a bit on the side.
Yeah.
The testers, when we started, were in that bottom floor there, where I believe is a canteen now, or
There is a canteen,
some
yeah.
restaurant. So that's where I was still testing by the time we moved. But I was asked to join the Colony Wars team just to create some levels. We had a sort of sandbox environment. We could knock up some levels or some situations using ships and things. We did a lot of testing around that, just to see if the idea would work. I was actually asked by Ian to draw the HUD for the spacecraft in Colony Wars. I was asked to draw the actual cockpit on an Amiga.
Because we didn't have enough artists.
Yeah. I did that. It only stayed for a few days, but it was a great time. But Colony Wars was certainly one of the ones I certainly remember.
One of my favourite PS1 games was Destruction Derby. That was like, my brother and I could play that for hours. Just an amazing concept for a game. I mean, where did that idea come from? Because that was just so much fun.
Well, it didn't come from us. That was from Reflections, who just turned up with a very, very good game. Yeah, it was amazing, Destruction Derby. I worked on the second and third, but not the first one. They all did that themselves up there. Just turned up with a very good game.
Another title was G-Police, which was it was kind of like a first-person shooter, but you kind of converted it into a ship. But it worked really well, and it got really popular. I remember it was ported for loads of stuff.
With a draw distance of about 10 metres. You could hardly see anything in the city.
Yeah, well, we often used to joke that it was just like Crazy Ivan, but the fade-off colour was black instead of whatever colour the sky was in Crazy Ivan. It was exactly the same tech.
That was done in the Stroud office. That wasn't done here in Liverpool. I think I provided one sound effect of the machine gun for that. But Stroud, I remember about G-Police is it took ages. I remember it felt like a bit of a joke in Liverpool that is it ever going to come out? It's been 18 months now. We kept seeing videos every now and again.
Yeah.
And then eventually it turned up, and honestly I thought that's going to be a disaster. But it was really good. They did a really good job with it.
Well, were there any kind of canned projects or really exciting stuff that we don't know about?
Oh, there were plenty of canned projects.
Yes,
Oh my god.
loads of them. Yeah, none very exciting. Not really. Wasn't any?
Well, I don't know.
They got canned for a reason.
Yeah, we did briefly entertain doing a Blade Runner.
Oh,
game.
the Blade Runner game. Oh yeah, okay. And Star Wars.
Yeah.
They're quite big. So before I joined, again, as part of the R&D and all the renders that the artists would do, they'd started doing a Star Wars game. And Lucas hadn't really got into games then, and so there was a deal almost done for Psygnosis to do the Star Wars game. And there was a bunch of test renders and things like that. I honestly don't know what the game could have been, because it was a lot of FMV. But that fell through. And then a bit later on, we did a pitch for Blade Runner. It was the same sort of thing. A lot of animations and test renders of, oh, look how good our artists are.
Yeah.
But we probably would have cocked up the game.
Well, I was slated to be on the Blade Runner team. So when I was working on this 3D editor, when I first joined ATG, I always wanted to get into game development. And for a very long time, that kind of went, oh, well, we really need the editor, we really need the editor. And then when we realized that nobody wanted the editor, it was like, oh, well, maybe you could work on Blade Runner, at which point I went, oh, that'd be cool. And then it got canned, and then I got put on Crazy Ivan, and yeah, the rest is history.
You know, kind of speaking of stuff that's been discovered from those days, I know, like, Mike, you and I first met at the Amiga 30 show. Steve Crietzman, who organised that. You've been working with him on this project called Eternal Psygnosis. Tell us about that and what you discovered.
Well, when we left the cesspit, there was a storeroom there, just had loads of stuff in it. There was just consoles and Amiga peripherals and all sorts of stuff. But the whole thing just got binned. Once we moved out, they brought the skip. Anything that was in there just went in the bin. So on the last day, before we moved out and moved to this place, I went in and I took every disc that I could, which is just tons of development floppies. You saw someone in that picture before. Because to me, they were important. They weren't important to anybody else, because at the time, we could see the new things in the future, and everybody wanted to do that. So the stuff we'd just done was irrelevant. That was the old stuff. We wanted the cool new stuff. And this is part of it being that difficult transition period. There was no value to anything we'd done, because it was all a bit crappy, because it was very difficult to get the most out of what was essentially bad technology, especially through the Mega CD era. So we'd do these projects, and we'd not be particularly happy with them until really Wipeout and the PlayStation came along. So nobody really thought anything of it. Yeah, bin that, move on to the next thing, but I thought it was important to keep it, so I pulled them all and carried them around with me for 20 years. Well, and it's a lot of boxes. I think, how many was it? Like 3,000 discs or something like that?
Oh,
it was a lot of discs. So we started to convert those and get all the data of them to see what's on them. And there's a ton of all this test stuff that was done by the artists, development versions of things. And this is how the Star Wars thing came out. We got all the original renders from that. So that was very useful. It's good.
Is there much more to find on them, or have you, how far into catalogue it?
I don't know at the moment. Steve was doing them and then releasing them online. I'm not entirely sure what percentage he's got through so far, but it's quite a lot of work to get through, and because they're all discs, so they have errors and stuff, so he has to run through all the error checking stuff, which can take an hour or two a disc. So it's a slow process.
Now this might be like asking you to pick your favourite kid, but if I could ask each of you, if you could pick just what is your favourite Psygnosis game?
Wow. No. That's no. I'd have to say Colony Wars. Because obviously because I was involved in that in some respects. Because it brings back really special memories. Just making the game itself, creating the levels, testing the levels out, the fun people had playing that, and still people are interested now. It seems slightly odd, but that's how they like it. I remember one of the times I was testing one of the early levels, and I got the ship, and I just went, instead of going to the battle, which parts of the game, parts of the level itself, I just turned around and flew into space. I thought, if I keep doing this, it's going to crash, the game's going to crash, or something's going to happen. So I left it for a bit, left it wedged so that the ship carried on, and I just sat back for a bit. And after a while, ZZ Top came on. ZZ Top.
What, in the game?
In the game. Mike Anthony's favourite band. And he left her in there just so if someone would find that, it wasn't left in the game obviously, but it was taken out. I said in one of the test sheets, Mike, I've been playing the game and suddenly ZZ Top's playing. What's going on? He wrote back, ha ha ha, on a piece of paper, and it was taken out. But yeah, no, having worked on Colony Wars 1 and 2, yeah, it'd have to be that sort of series, definitely.
Well, unfortunately, I'm going to be quite boring and agree, just because I'm an avid space buff and I like games with a story behind them. So yeah, Colony Wars has always been my favourite. The Wipeouts have a special place because I help work on them, but definitely Colony Wars.
I can't say Colony Wars because I've never played it. No, I never played it. I'm not entirely sure why.
You should.
Yeah, I should have a go. Maybe it would be that, but it's not. Best Psygnosis game. That's very difficult.
It's a damn shame you haven't made any more since.
Any what?
Sorry, supposed to get it in. They haven't made any more since.
They haven't made any more, no? Well, Vengeance.
Well, yeah.
That's very difficult.
But it changes by the day, does it?
Well, they're all so different. I mean, from the Amiga era, there's a whole bunch of good stuff, and then through the PlayStation era, there's good stuff as well. Obviously, I prefer the ones I did the music on. But even so, it's a double-edged sword, because working on most of them was very, very hard work. So even if you like the game, you know the bad stuff you have to go through to get that on screen. It's got to be said, Wipeout's the best thing we did. How can it not be? It made such a difference to the whole industry. It was a big deal. But I didn't do much on Wipeout 1, I have to say. Moral support.
Well, I'm sure you guys have got some questions. But first of all, let's give a warm thank you to our guest today. And just put your hand up if you've got a question. Ravi is coming around with a microphone.
I'm Trisha today, so...
Any questions for our guests? One down here.
Is it Psygnosis or Psygnosis?
I was going to comment on that at the beginning, actually. Everybody pronounced it Psygnosis, but the guy who invented the word pronounces it Psygnosis. So internally, we would always say Psygnosis. And people say, but it's got a Y, but so is the word hypnosis.
And of course, if you're the local milkman, he'd come in and go, right there, is this pig's noses? Which was a corker.
After we got bought by Sony, somebody quickly realised that it was an anagram of Sony's pigs.
Obviously, Psygnosis was operating at a time when British developers were at a real cutting edge, and the accessibility of development on the Amiga really helped that. Do you think it... For UK...
Do we think it's more difficult for UK developers to be competitive in today's market? In a way, it depends on what level. At the ground roots level, no, but in terms of doing AAA titles, yes, because as an independent developer, it's easier if you're going for the big money to get it from the US, not from the UK, because they more readily pay for things. So yeah, it's more difficult as a high-end developer, but on a lower level, anybody can get started. It's difficult to make money, but it's not so difficult to actually get started. But it is a big difference, because back then, if you were a bedroom coder, you could make a top-level game. Now, if you're a bedroom coder, you make a bedroom game. You need, I mean, look at GTA 5. It's had 1,000 people working on it, so you can't compete with that as a bedroom developer. It's very difficult to get that sort of money in the UK.
If you had the chance now to remake in the modern era any Psygnosis game, which one would you like to redo?
Chris will say Colony Wars.
Certainly Colony Wars, yeah. Yeah, so much scope. Yeah. So much scope for some... There hasn't been a really, in my eyes, an arcade type space game similar to what Colony Wars brought. That's been, like that for a long time. It's it's far. It's been a long time. Yeah, it needs something redoing again. I'd say certainly. And if I had the time and the money, I'd do it. Or a big building like that with 1,000 staff. Yeah.
It's difficult to say. I'd prefer to say something a bit more obscure. There's one game that I always liked, and that was Assault Rigs. That was done in the Stroud office as well. That was a good game. I don't think many people played that, but it was good. I'd like to see a new version of that. That was good.
Well, every time I told someone that I worked at Psygnosis, they always said, "Oh, Shadow of the Beast." So, to be honest with you, I'd like to remake that.
Well, it's already been remade.
Okay.
How do you want it remade this time?
I've never played the remake.
It's on the PS4.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Oh, bloody hell. Well, there you go.
You can always remake it.
And nobody at Psygnosis was involved in it.
Aww. Oh, fair enough.
Try again.
Well, that was it. That's all I had.
You're happy then? Straight onto PSN when you get home.
I need to buy a PS4, don't I?
We have another question?
A follow-on. Follow-on question.
Agony, okay.
I would consider doing a HD remake.
A HD remake of Agony.
Agony.
I can't even visualize the game.
Surely it was HD enough. It was very graphically impressive, Agony. I was always impressed when that came in. It was very good. To be honest, that would be a very difficult one to get Sony to pay for these days. A straightforward 2D shooter. Not quite bullet hell.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very good though. It's very widely regarded, Agony. Very widely regarded.
It's really well done. Wasn't it based on the Psygnosis Owl?
Well, I can't remember if it was pitched with the owl in, or if it was made into an owl because we were Psygnosis.
Yeah, I'm sure it was.
That was a nice fit anyway.
You know, we can have a fight later on. It's all right.
Do we have time for one more question? Anybody else? Over here, Robin.
I'm going to ask...
He needs the exercise.
Sorry, the mic's a bit... You were a developer for games as well as a publisher for games. Are there any games you published that you'd wish you'd been involved with making?
All of the successful ones. It's always nice to have a good successful credit. I'm not... It's difficult to say really, because I worked on so much stuff. There wasn't that many I didn't have some contribution to. Because doing audio, you get to work on a load of stuff. It's not like being on one team for the whole 12 months or whatever it's going to be. I just do stuff near the end, really. I mean, at one point, I was working on 9 games at once in one period. That was a nightmare. So I did a bit of everything. But some of the bigger ones, even the bigger ones that we did that I didn't work on, I ended up working on the franchises of the sequels in some way. So it's hard for me to really pick something that I'd say I'd like to, well, all right, Colony Wars.
Yeah, I'd like to work on Colony Wars just because that's my genre of game. I do love that sort of stuff. So watching the other team work on it and having my friends, I'd be socializing with them in the evenings and it'd be like, oh man, you guys are doing all the cool stuff. Aww. So yeah, I'd definitely go with Colony Wars.
Colony Wars? No, you worked on Colony Wars, so you can't choose that.
Did some design and some level building, yes.
Actually, Colony Wars was one of ours, so that wasn't a third-party one.
Yeah. Colony Wars?
Yeah, which third-party game would you like to have worked on?
Yeah. Can't think at the moment. I can't. No, I can't think. I'd have to give it lots more thought.
What was that game you worked on where they stole your designs?
What?
With the green bouncing ball on the Amiga?
Oh, what was that? Oh, ask me later.
There was a game that we would go into sign and Chris started doing the design for it.
Yeah.
And then we didn't sign, they went to another publisher and took all of Chris's designs. I can't remember which one. No, it wasn't that.
No.
It was by Core, I think.
It'll come to you at about 2 in the morning, probably. Well, guys, I just want to, I'm sure I speak for everybody here, just saying thank you so much for those amazing games that we all played growing up. You know, absolutely, Psygnosis is one of the most legendary British video games companies. Let's give the guys a round of applause.